Very much welcome my panel here. It's huge, but we make it concise. And the organization, Christina and Matthias, they have put together a lot of questions for this conference, what we should talk about. And I just want to sum up again one of the main questions. Berlin and Toronto as the two main startup hubs in Germany and Canada, respectively. How are the startup ecosystems characterized in these hubs and in the two countries' work in general? Another question, what are the differences and the commonalities? How can Canada and Germany cooperate in the startup sector? How can they learn from one another and support startups and create successful companies? How can entrepreneurship be fostered as a social factor? And how can country benefit from a vital startup scene? So we don't start the day, we only have 1.5, 2 hours left, so we probably won't be able to answer everything, but let's start. And I will start on the panel with those guests who have not been speakers before. And if I may, I'm going to start with Amber. Welcome. And I've decided for every Canadian on the panel, we're going to do a yay, yay. And Amber, you have created many startups. At least I've known of the 1001 Hochzeiten.de, but actually you run Makerist, which won the Startup Prize 2013. And I know you work here in Berlin, and I would love to hear from you about your experience as a startup in the ecosystem for entrepreneurs here in Berlin.
Thank you, and thank you for changing the questions, because the questions which I thought I originally had to answer, I thought, oh my God, I've never heard of that book. I don't know what I will say. But I can talk, I think, very much about, of course, my experience. So I'm actually Canadian. I moved to Berlin 10 years ago. And I had just graduated from political science at UBC, and I wanted to have a job at the Canadian Embassy. And here I am. No, but I actually had a very, I had a very different career path, and I started by working at Transparency International. It was a very big organization. It was also very interesting coming out of political science to see how that was. I'll be quick. And then I discovered I actually that's not the kind of work that I want to do. The organization is too big. Everything is too slow. I can't be as efficient as I want to be. And I think that's really the main thing about being an entrepreneur or doing a startup, is that you really have this love for efficiency. And that's the thing that motivates me the most. Is I always thought, oh, I can do that so much faster if I could just really, do it myself and really take the decisions and see everything through to the end. I think I could be much more efficient and much more successful, and hopefully one day also wealthy. So I think that's also an important thing which no one likes to talk about. But like when you do a startup, you're also hoping that you're excited about the work that you do, but you're also hoping that one day you can be wealthy. So I started in 2008 a wedding website. Because that was the year that I also got married, and I was hoping to find some sort of resources on the internet that could help me plan my wedding more easily, because I am from Canada, my husband is from Austria, we wanted to be married in Greece, and we were living in Germany, and it was very complicated. And there was nothing in Germany that could sort of help me through this planning process, and I thought, oh, the internet is perfect for that, and I'm sure there's other people that have that problem. And that's what got me started in 2009. 2008, 2009. Then I expanded that with a website for wedding gift registries, so how to sort of use the internet to coordinate the wishes for people when they're getting married, what they want to have for gifts and so on. And this, when I was doing this startup, it was a very different experience than what I'm doing now with Makerist, because I started it by myself, and I did it all by myself over these years with also always a very small team. So this is something which I've talked to other people about. What's the difference between having like a very high amount of shares in a company with a low value, or having a small amount of shares in a company with a high value? And at one point, parallel to doing this wedding registry and wedding magazine website, I had 2 children, and I tried to still do the website and still, iPhone, with my iPhone and my laptop and my baby kind of like in the baby carrier, and sort of like how I can still get the much time out to still make it work and still make it work. And then, yeah, and having all this experience, especially doing the first one, I really found what is part of being an entrepreneur is also not just having this need for efficiency and for speed, but also finding out how you can do the most with the least amount of resources and the least amount of money. And then one of the best ways to do that is to use other people. So to build up a big network and always find out, okay, what are you doing? And oh, maybe you can help me with that. And maybe you have a good connection to that person and so on. There I had a really good experience with the MediaNet Berlin Brandenburg. They have an entrepreneur program it's based on Entrepreneurs Club, I think. There you have to have a lot more money to get into that club, and this sort of smaller program is meant for startups, and that was really helpful. And there I met a really good group of other people in startups, and that's actually how I came to meet Christina, through one of my contacts there. And then with Makerist, I saw the chance to have a really different startup experience, which was, there I saw really the potential that this could be a really big company. I had the chance to work in a team and with also a good deal of funding. So I think the first speaker mentioned high-tech Gründerfonds as being a good example of the state in the entrepreneur system, and that was our first investor. And we've had also a really great experience with them. Yeah, so now I have this experience of working sort of still in a small company, but which is growing fast, which has, you know, the right amount of people working in it, the right amount of money, that we can really still work with our speed and work with our efficiency, but on a different scale. And just talking quick, one more thing about, you know, these ecosystems. I think it's really important. I'm not sure exactly, you know, this how well or how easy it will be to connect two different cities together, because I think really the strong thing about an entrepreneur ecosystem here in Berlin is that everything is so close together, and the distance, the physical distance is so short, and you don't tend to not to think about that because you think, oh, it's the internet and everyone is connected to everyone. But it makes a really big difference when you meet people in person and when you can just meet them at the corner for a coffee. And you get in this kind of a situation in much different topics and much different discussions with them and more help from them than you could if you could send them an email. So here you have really this network of people. It's quite easy in Berlin if you say, oh, I'm looking for an investor, to find someone who knows an investor and start getting these talks going on.
Thank you. I think that was a first good insight into what an ecosystem means, and we might get deeper into the special ecosystem for entrepreneurs here in Berlin later. Thank you first for this first presentation here. I'm going to move on to Christian Moosfeld. And Christian, the company you work for, Osborne Clark, is a major sponsor of this conference. And I wondered, reading about it, what is the role of your company in this ecosystem for entrepreneurs, leading also to the fact that you support conferences like this one?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and thanks for having us as a sponsor here to this wonderful event. Just quickly, what we are doing here in Berlin, I'm sort of heading the Berlin operations of Osborne Clark, which basically means that I'm doing a lot of tech M&A and also venture capital transactions. It's really our main focus here. And we've got three lines of clients, really. The first one is a very strong inbound traffic from our offices in the UK and the US mainly. Then we're doing a lot for local and foreign venture capital investors. And finally, to get to your question, we do a lot of work for founders as well. I think we've started doing that very, very early and been very dedicated with that, which basically means for the founders who work with us that we're trying to open our network. And we really mean that. You know, everybody's got a network, but we're really trying to get intros done to investors, maybe to other corporations they're doing first business with. So that's sort of one aim we always have when working with founders very early. And the other thing which we sort of see as our most important job, really, apart from, of course, being very excellent with all the documents and on a very formal and legal front. It's really to try and show the founders sort of when it's the right time to pick a fight, you know, especially with investors, but also with any third party they're dealing with, because our experience really is that most founders really come straight from university. They are pretty inexperienced, a lot of energy, you know, a lot of things to do, but sometimes it really is probably the right step, especially when you are really entering into contracts, to settle down a bit, you know, get the head sort of out of the clouds a bit and really see what's important, what's not, and then try to execute on deals, because that usually saves actually a lot more costs with regard to lawyers, and also energy on everybody's behalf, really.
Thank you. We will talk about more of that later. I'm going to move now to Sascha Schubert. And Sascha is a social or an entrepreneur himself. I can't really differentiate with your CV if you're a social entrepreneur or sort of business entrepreneur, probably both.
It's pretty easy. I'm an entrepreneur.
Great.
Because I think there's no great difference between those perspectives. Both entrepreneurs need a kind of entrepreneurial mindset, start things and move things forward. And if it's for you or for somebody else, it doesn't matter.
Okay. But my question to you is, you're also the vice chairman of the German Startup Association. And preparing for this event, I wondered, the Startup Association, is this an adaptation to the sort of big business world we have here in Germany, sort of, you know, otherwise you can't sort of get access and make yourself heard if you don't have an association or Verband in Germany?
Yeah, actually, we started to work on the startup ecosystem here in Berlin back in 2005 with the first event, and this was basically for getting in touch with other people, because the MediaNet Catapult program was not existing, or the Entrepreneurs Organization was not there, and we did that for ourselves and thought, okay, maybe it's a good chance to get in touch with business angels when we put them on stage and invite all of our friends to be part of that. And it developed, and 2 years ago we decided to start the German Startups Association, basically because of the reason that we thought that the wrong people talk to the right people. Yeah, actually we see that a lot of big guys from big companies were talking to Angela Merkel and saying something about startups, and we thought, okay, but we think this is not what we want. So we decided to say, hey, we have to talk to Angela Merkel and Sigmar Gabriel, or at that time Philipp Rösler, and we have to make ourselves heard.
Okay. I mean, that's quite then the bigger picture of an infrastructure or ecosphere when we started now in Berlin. And we will even go a bit bigger now, because I'm going to turn our right to Dirk, who has to leave at 5:30, and he apologizes. Your presentation was quite impressive, and I also noticed the fact you said 35 countries you're responsible for, about. You know them, you travel them, and of course, you know, in a big company, but again, a startup in a way, or leaving startup. What is your view of the ecosystems across the area you work in? Is there something comparable? Are there sort of champions and others sort of still need a lot of catching up?
A very good question. And so I don't think there's this one ecosystem, which I see. So I'm just to make that clear, I'm dealing mainly with European, African, and Middle East countries. So what I see is there are very different approaches in different countries. I mean, one example which is always taken is the example of Israel, which is a great way to support startups. Nevertheless, I think we have pretty good structures in Germany, as you just described. My problem with Germany is always more that it's not about funding, it's not about the position of a startup. It's about how can I enable, especially technology, to be successful, and don't regulate it before it's even invented. So that's one of my key things I'm talking about all the time. But if I have a look to countries like Estonia, for example, a very small one, I lived there for a while, so I know how it is. It's about a mindset over there. People know we're a small country. We're not having the big industry. So the only thing we can be successful in is creating new ideas, selling it to the world. So if you really have a closer look to that, it makes the difference. In Germany, or in the UK, I see, or in, let's say, Turkey or something, there is a different mindset of people. The majority is not thinking, the only thing I can do is be successful by creating something new.
But in the US, you have the same, huh? This is, I think, what you say is wrong.
No, you can disagree, but you can't say that what I say is wrong. Sorry for that, but it's my experience. On the other hand, if I see how entrepreneurs and startups are supported, as I said, there are very different approaches around the world, and I can't say the one is good or the other is bad. It's just if you see where things grow. It's a different mindset, and that's where I challenge I'm wrong. The US has a different mindset that we have. I don't say that it's just about the size of the country. It's about the mindset that people have.
Yeah, I knew that Frank would raise his voice when we'd start talking about that, and you would be the next. We just do one round of first presentations, and then we get into a discussion on the podium, and please do, and I'm going to make sure that you are involved into that. Frank, you also work internationally, and the preparation which you did with Michael, and which I could read, you mentioned, for example, the business canvas of Alex Osterwalder, and you also talked about look at Israel, how they have done it, and what I liked most, you said you have to compare the different ecosystems, for example, in Berlin, Toronto, places like Barcelona, and then tell what's the difference. So what's the difference for you then?
Normally you say young artists, they try to imitate, experienced artists copy. And this is what you can do. When you go back to Israel, Yossi Smoller is the person under the Chief Technology Officer who set up this incubation program. And government goes into risk. So the normal way is, there are two reasons why they're successful, at least what he told me, and I know him for several years now. The first thing is that they go into risk. The startup companies have an idea, they get 50,000 next to the normal job to prepare a business plan, and then they enter the incubation center and they get 500,000 right away. And the government pays 85% and 50% pays the business angel. And this is kind of a convertible loan, and if the company is successful, the business angel takes these 85% for the nominal prices and continues and brief it up. If it's not successful, the government takes the risk. This is the first why it works. They don't have to queue 50 times like we do here in Europe, and Berlin comes in a second. And when you look into the people, 80% of the really successful entrepreneurs have a very interesting military career. Most of them are officers. They are learned to achieve goals, they motivate, they take risk, and they have an excellent education, and they deliver. So I think this is part of the success. Going to Berlin, Berlin is like northern Italy. They are successful, also they have a government, which sounds a little bit hard, but the Berlin government, sorry, I can see that from the European perspective, have done zero. They have hindered. They are super lucky that it's cheap here, that it's hyped, that they have good clubs, and also I have to say, we have incubation center in Barcelona. This is more attractive. It's 1 kilometer away from the Mediterranean Sea. But they have other problems. So business it's hype. This is the reason why Berlin runs. But the government has done zero for that. It rather hindered, and I see you nodding it. When you look into Barcelona, for example, that's great. In the incubation center, they train everybody, from a student who wants to open a kiosk to a big company who wants to do a spin-outs. And you can create a company. There's a lawyer sitting in the incubation centers, and with 24 hours, you have your limited company. Wow. So this is what good governance is. And when we look into Berlin, therefore I rather looking to Europe or Germany and Canada, the power will be connecting startup companies. Bringing a Canadian startup connected to a startup here who knows the market, who maybe knows Eastern Europe, knows European market, and say, okay, we make a joint venture on fair eyes business. This is what the Rocket Internet tries to do, is centralized. I said, decentralize it. If you go to the Canadian market and you're a young startup company, have no clue what to do, you either have deep pockets or the right address book. Most of the time you have none. But if you have a startup who knows the market, you make a fair deal, I'm sure you can really enter the world quicker and get market share. So I think taking that into perspective, Germany is not doing bad, Europe is not doing bad, it's other reasons why it's not working. We have good examples like the high-tech Gründerfonds, but I think we have to where are sources what we can copy, and this we do not do. We focus a little bit too much on ourselves in that respect.
Thank you. You want to add something?
I don't want to have a dispute with you. So.
That's fine, I like it.
No, it's I partly disagree. If you say the government has done nothing, and I have to say I'm a political guy, so I come back to my point where I said it's a different kind of mindset. You know, you're in a country, and I'm sitting in groups discussing with the German government about research funding and research support, and you have in there companies like Siemens, BASF, BMW, I don't know, all the blue chips. And interestingly, even they say, okay, we need to change that. We can live well out of the system how it is, but we have to adapt that to support smaller companies, especially startups. But the point is, in a society where you have really the top 20 or 50 companies employing so many people in a country, the government is really slow to maneuver out of this, taking a risk that it might impact one of the big companies. So there is a lot of effort. There is a lot of interest done, but we might not be as fast as other countries. And so it's on us, really. It's on us to support them. And therefore, I'm really happy to hear that there's the Startup Association, because it's exactly the right input. It's not right that we, with the big companies, are just talking about how to support startups. We need the input of the people who do that.
Are you working for government now, or are you working for BlackBerry? I'm a little confused.
I did work for the government, but...
There's customers.
I want to keep that a little bit in order here.
So it's just my personal thing that I don't want to have the word out that the government is doing nothing.
Sasha, I wanted, like, from the what are your main discussions at the moment with the government?
I think we have to add more perspectives to that. The German government is pretty good when it comes to fund stuff. Yeah, they're really putting a lot of money. I heard a number, it's 1.3 billion euros were invested, public money were invested in Adlershof. But actually, when you look on the government, they are always doing two things. They push they push on the accelerator, and on the other hand, the brake. And this is what the government usually does. And actually, when it comes to startups, it's a pretty bad thing, because as a startup, you need speed. This is the only advantage you have when you want to compete with the big guys. You're 3 times faster in deciding stuff, and you're still lean. And actually, if you apply for public money, it takes you 9 months or 12 months here in Berlin. And actually, the people don't understand that this is the most important question. It's not so important if you actually get 300 or 500,000 euros, but it's super important when you get the money. Is it in 9 months or in 12 months? And actually, I'm super happy that the high-tech Gründerfund is existing, but I think this is still 95% of the money is still public money, and there's only a small amount of private money in that. And what we want is actually the government support. There's the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. The government support for startups or for entrepreneurs is on number 1 worldwide. But when it comes to private money, we are on place 57 or something. And actually what we want from the government is that they change some stuff, that we can have more private money invested in the startup system. And actually this is not really happening.
Okay, before we come to Germany, centerfolded, I have one question from the audience on my Bierdeckel. And the question is, we heard that CETA, or CETA, however you pronounce it, will create opportunities for Canadian and European businesses alike. And can you elaborate on how CETA will potentially have an impact on the startup ecosystems in either regions? Who wants to go first? And afterwards, I would like to come back to the Berlin and Toronto and these sort of more concrete ecosystems.
I think, is here anybody in the room who actually read this?
No, but this, as I said, I agree with you. There are so many nice funding programs, but this is the only solution I have to really connect the companies to each other. This, because they are quick, there's a speed, and you have to use the speed, and they find opportunities. So this is what we see, where we have most of the success of the alumni network of 300. We connect to each other, and then the rest they do. And they are so quick that, the big industry is sometimes really surprised. So, but as I say, it's not only funding, it's which you have to provide.
You want to add something? No? Okay. Now I get mixed up with my cards. But leaving now the big political spheres, we talked about before about the atmosphere and the spirit which came up. And the Vodafone Institute has recently done a survey among German and other European countries. How many of young people would like to work in startups or do a tech startup themselves? And in Germany, I guess the number was about 70% don't want to do it. Quite many of the young people feel sort of stressed out by all the new equipment. And Christian, you go to universities, you're in touch with young people. What's your impression? Has Vodafone just sort of asked the wrong people in order to sort of support their donor, or is there something connected to it?
Maybe they sort of ask young lawyers, you know, whether they still want to do that. No, but that's another discussion. I think, no, if you look at universities, I think most of the guys who are actually doing entrepreneurship are really very enthusiastic about what they do or what they're going to do in the future. And of course, I think it is quite a lot which was being asked of those people later on. So I'm not surprised if people being confronted with such a question sort of rather say, no, I'm not really too fond of doing that. But then I think they're probably not the right guys for that sort of job, because it is a high energy job, very high demand. So I'm a bit surprised, to be honest, but maybe I'm actually not really looking at the majority of people, but rather the small niche again, because we are all sort of fairly much niche players as we are sitting here. Probably all a bit fighting for relevance, going back to what you said before about the political scene. So therefore, I think I don't really have a very good overview on that, but it doesn't really surprise me.
Amber, you created your startups in Berlin, but you're originally from Canada. I don't know, I would like to bring in a Canadian perspective to that. Do you think, talking to your friends back home, and if you don't have an opinion on that, that's fine too. Do you think the spirit, sort of the drive towards startups is different in places like Toronto and broader in Canada than it is here?
I don't know if I can say very much to that, because I've been here basically since university, but I can imagine that my life would be very different if I lived in Canada. If I look at all my friends, they all have houses with mortgages and very safe jobs with good salaries and cars, and in here, I don't know if it's just that I would have a different group of friends here, but I don't think that's it. I think people live a very different kind of life. They're more renting, they're not having so much cars, they're taking more risks. I think it's a much risk-friendlier sort of environment. And I would say also to your question with the Vodafone information, I'm not sure if people maybe, if they think, oh, a tech startup is so technological, maybe I have to program or I have to code to be able to work there. And I think that's really not true, because actually usually a quite small amount of people who found tech startups are actually doing this. You know, they're usually some of the first employees, or they're outsourced or so, but the people who are really founding these companies are people from sort of different disciplines, like they study BWL or they study sort of even soft subjects like political science.
Thank you. And I don't want to forget that we have participants in Toronto, so if you want to elaborate on the Canadian perspective, please do. I just have one question here from the audience.
That's actually what I wanted to ask, whether the colleagues in Toronto want to add to that, and what is their perspective on the ecosystem in Toronto?
All right, somebody wants to talk about that?
Gladly to answer. I don't know what the environment in Germany is, but my instinct is to say that here in Canada we have it actually fairly good, and I'll tell you why. First and foremost, I think we have, it's very easy to set up a company. It's registering one on the web and getting a number. You don't even have to have a name for it. You just get a number and the company is registered. I think Toronto, the education system is fairly good in Toronto, and we also have, Canada has an active immigration policy, so we get people coming from all over the world, and one of the requirements, it's easier if you have a degree to come to Canada, and it's easier yet if you have work experience, and that allows for the immigrants to come to the country to settle in Canada to be fairly well prepared. So I would argue that the talent pool in Canada is actually very high caliber. The third element that I can think of is the cost of hiring people in Canada is lower than in the States. So we here always compare ourselves to the Americans, and we find that for any startup to go to California, where let's say the Valley or near Palo Alto, you know, hiring a web developer would be something like $75,000 to $100,000 per year. I believe in Canada salaries are quoted per month, so they would work roughly to up to about $10,000 per month. In Canada, the reality is that you could find developers with something as low as $20 an hour. $20 an hour means about $40,000 a year, so let's say under $4,000 a month.
Okay.
Another reason why I think Canada is a fairly fertile ground for startups is that the community is large, and yet there's a certain camaraderie I think you come across people, and it's easy to, relatively easy I should say, to connect with people. Like as the lady from Canada had mentioned earlier, and I do apologize, I didn't catch your name. You always speak with someone who refers you to someone else, and that puts you in touch with someone else, and so you get access to people that have influence with money, that have influence, I guess, with advice, that can help you out with merely just connecting you with others. So I think this is another reason that I find here things happen fairly quickly. And ultimately, my argument would be Canada is a testing ground. Obviously, everyone knows that the United States represent the biggest market, especially when you operate in English. This is very easy. And Canada being about 1/10 of the size of the States, this is the way to test before you roll it out, I guess. And sorry, I just realized one more thing. There are many places in Toronto, at least. We call them startup accelerators. The reason why we're hosting right now with George Brown is one of several colleges in Toronto. And the reason we host it here is because we effectively rent space from them in their accelerator to run the business day by day. And also they provide us all the support. We have access to their tech support, all the logistics aspect, plus space as well. So anyway, to wrap it up, I would say here my perception is that it's fairly easy both to start a company and also to run it.
Thank you. Thank you. I stood up from the podium because I want to involve you. So I see your first, okay, here we go, here we go. I start here, and please say who you are and where you're from.
My name's Carolee Gill. I'm originally from Ottawa, but I've been living in Germany for 15 years. And I'm interested in, also to Toronto, for people sitting in Toronto, I really appreciated what you just said. I was interested in, sometimes I get the feeling that Canada's slow in certain things. Like, the infrastructure makes things easier, like you mentioned, bank accounts, that kind of thing. Nathan talked about it this morning. He came to Germany and he was going to open a bank account, so he went to the bank and he thought he could open the bank account that day. So it doesn't work like that in Germany. It takes a long time, and you need papers and forms and all kinds of things. Probably DNA or something like that. And in Canada, those things go quicker, but I still get the feeling in Canada things are sometimes so slow moving, and yeah, so maybe in Toronto, maybe you're missing the European perspective, but maybe Amber can say something about that cultural impression I have.
Thank you.
Is this for me or for?
Yeah, that would be for you, or
so
whoever here would like to answer.
My perspective is that business has to do with people, and so it's really navigating the people network that you have. I run a website, and when we were looking for funding, one of the challenges that we came across is that we were not able to secure much funding in Canada. So you would say, okay, well, the investors don't like to invest here. Is it because there's no money? Is it because the profile of the people, they tend to be more conservative? I think it's a combination of the two. And I would add something on top of that to say, I think a lot of investors with money don't really get what I'm offering. And as a result, they shy away from putting their money in it because they don't understand what it is that I'm selling or that I'm creating.
Yeah,
I think that's my only comment. I don't know what else to say. I think that you can have tremendous talent and skills, and if you don't find the right organization where you as an individual can grow, perhaps your growth is slowed down. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same with startups. I think you just need to find the fertile ground.
Thank you. Okay, I have two questions next to each other. I'm going to start with you.
Yes, hello. I lived in Canada for many years, then I also lived in the UK, and now in Germany. And all that has been said is basically also my own personal experience, that the Anglo-Saxon countries, it's easier to do business, and there's a can-do attitude. I opened my consulting company in Montreal in less than a day, right? I had my number, I had the company name, and that was it, basically. I'll give you just one example. I don't know how many people in the audience will like me, but in 1976, right, when I went to study in Montreal, I called up Bell Canada, and I said, I want a phone in my college dormitory. And they said, yes, sir, no problem. In 24 hours, you'll have your phone connection. In 24 hours, I pick up the phone, and it was working. I came to Berlin in 1994. There was a jack in the apartment. We even used the old phone number from the previous tenant, and it still took a month and a half that we get a phone connection. So I don't think I need to say sort of anything more.
Okay.
Doing business, and that's, and it's not a problem with Germany only, it's a problem in continental Europe. There's a sclerotic sort of mindset, do attitude.
Thank you. Citing Friends kid, what's a telephone? Okay, I have another question here. I'm going to take questions together and then go back to the podium.
Hi, my name is Melanie. I'm working for a startup founded here in Berlin called Medigo. And if you paneled university students in Canada, you would have a similar response with regards to working for a startup after completing your degree. When I graduated 6 years ago, I would have had absolutely no idea about working for a startup. I would never have considered that as an option at the time because it wasn't encouraged at university, even though I actually took entrepreneurial classes in a business degree. But when you think that's a very small amount of people who would take this kind of course and learn all the things they would have to know in order to start a startup, there are so many other students who are studying university who would have absolutely no idea either. And I think, as Amber mentioned, having a job in a small company that's no one's heard of wouldn't be considered as a success coming out of university, rather than, oh, I got a marketing job for Bell Canada, then everyone knows who that is. So that would lead you as well to this comfortable, stable life. So the instability of a startup and also all the unknowns, I think, would be foreign to not only Canadians but Germans as well.
Thank you. Frank?
We are nearly in the side discussion. I agree that in Germany it's not perfect, but it has changed over the last 15 years. It's becoming better. Yeah? And this has to do also with the spirit. And when we saw the waves in the first presentation, you should go more in history, because in the north part of Germany there was big employees. You know, in the south there was nothing. So the entrepreneurship wave we had in the 60s and the 50s, we're now getting really the best out of it. So if you see a lot of companies in Baden-Württemberg and Bayern, which was have a very strong SME policy over 30 years, 40 years. Now we're collecting. But then, you know, if you become lazy, you know, in my county where I'm living, the unemployment rate is 1.9%. You get lazy, you get a job, you know, you don't have to queue, they come to you. So if you get lazy, you get dizzy. And this is what it is. So this is the first thing. So unemployment, a crisis is always something positive, and you see also investors, when the stock price goes up, then they start to invest again. So there must be a change, there is a change, maybe it's not as quick as we would like to do. So therefore I think it's very important to teach entrepreneurship already in school, and school kills the creativity. We kill the creativity of our kids until they go to university, and then we try to bring it back. And maybe this is one of the reasons why we have so less entrepreneurship. And this we have to change. We have to start early. I agree.
Yeah, go on.
I got to be part of a mentoring program from the HVB this year, and one of the girls who's also part of it's only for women, by the way. They're like for Gründerinnen to get more women in the startup sector. And one of the other girls the women in the program, she's doing app camps in schools in Germany isn't that great? Excellent. Yeah, so she's I guess not out there right now to make like a lot of money, but she's out there to teach kids how to code and to show them that it's fun, and to start teaching people early on.
Yeah, and as I brought up the Vodafone study, the second part of it was that in Southern Europe, in Spain, Greece, and these countries, the openness of young people to work in startups and so on is much bigger, and many of them said, otherwise I don't have a chance. So it's a lot about the economic pressure probably. But I have another question here.
Hi, my name is Agnes. I'm one of the founding members of the Canada Meets Germany Alumni Forum, and I work here at the embassy. And I have another question on mindsets and cultural differences. And I would be interested to know your opinion about the mindset of failure. What do you do if your business fails? Because you cannot expect that your first company is a success. Maybe it's only the third or the fourth. And I think that my impression is that the Germans are very very reluctant to speak about failure and to deal with failure. And I'd be interested to know your opinion on that, also compared to Canada. So a view from Toronto would also be much appreciated.
Who would like to answer?
I organized the first FailCon here in Berlin, and actually the German perspective on failure is bad. The people who do failures should be sued, and no one should ever talk about that. And this is actually the best way to learn. This is now kind of sarcastic. Actually, this is a big problem, and it's not only a problem in the German culture. It's also a problem in the German legal framework, because if you actually borrow the money to grow your company and you fail, you always have to give a private guarantee, and this really sucks. And actually, this is one of the biggest issues to have second-time entrepreneurs who failed with their first startup. And actually, this is a really bad thing from my point of view. And if you look in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, this is the main reason why people in Germany don't start companies. They are afraid to fail. And now the lawyer.
Yeah. Well, no, I think now it's my time to contradict you, actually. I think you're right. I mean, we've got this tendency in Germany to actually draft contracts with personal liability for the founders. This is more or less unheard of for Anglo-Saxon investors. They're really surprised what they can actually get here on this market. You know, they really like it suddenly. But the funny thing is that even though those rules are in most contracts, they've never been followed through. Have you ever heard of somebody who gets sued by an investor? I haven't, but if you, hopefully you say no, actually. Please say no for argument's sake, because really it doesn't happen very often, because nobody likes bad news. And it's not just the entrepreneurs, it's also the investors, because investors are constantly fundraising. You know, they've got their own investors to answer to. And they don't like failure either, which basically means that they throw lifeline after lifeline to failing startups, and they don't actually let them fail, because they don't like the bad news either. And that's also the bad news scare is also the reason why breaches of guarantees are not really followed up. It's always sort of done behind closed doors, which normally doesn't result in the founder's personal liability, but rather in them losing all the shares. You know, I'm not saying this is really great, but at least some of the fear of some of those contracts actually taken out by reality, really.
But actually, I think equity funding is only 0.5% of all the funding to young companies. The most of the funding is given by banks to companies. And actually, even if you have a 10 million in turnover, the bank still asks the business owner for a personal guarantee. And maybe you can still remember the guy who started the Entrepreneurs Club with me. Every time we send him money, we have to send this money to his mother's bank account for almost 10 years. And this is actually in Germany we don't have an equity culture, and this is the biggest problem for high growth companies, because if you fund your company, even with a government loan right now, with the profit program, you have to give a personal guarantee. And this is, from my point of view, not good.
Okay, sorry, I was not actually talking about it. Just very, very quickly. I mean, you're absolutely right. If it's bank loans or these sort of loans where you are liable, that's a different thing. I was really mentioning rather venture capital instruments, and yeah, that's the only thing I want to say there. But you're totally right.
All right, we're getting away with the time. Before I close this panel, anybody else would like to say something from the audience here?
Yeah, my name is Max Bornefeld-Edmann. I'm living in Berlin. I'm an entrepreneur here. And Mr. Salzgeber, he spoke about experiences from Israel and the military culture there. And I thought all the time whether there's also something to contribute from this point of view, from a German perspective. And I recently was on a military training site and participated in a huge exercise. And we had a planning department there. And below all their emails, they had the wonderful sentence, "Stick to the plan." And this was absolutely stupid for all of us all the time, because we all think about Helmut von Moltke, who some 150 years ago said, "No plan survives the first contact with the enemy." But the point that I want to make is that German soldiers, German officers, and also a number of other countries, but Germany in particular, is very good in planning. So you can learn a lot from military planning processes. Although, if you always stick to the plan, this probably will not be so successful. The other thing, one idea I just want to deliver, because it hasn't been said now until yet, is the absence of social control here in Berlin. So this is, in the daily lives, this can be really a bad situation, because everyone is doing what he wants and spitting on the ground and so on and so on. But on the other hand, it's what everyone likes in Berlin. Coming here, not being, there's no social pressure all the time. No one tells you what to do all the time. I think this is really part of what makes Berlin a startup ecosystem, that you are free to do whatever you like to. And I know, because I founded a GmbH some time ago, I know that this is a very complicated process, but if you get self-employed, that is a very easy process. It's just a 15-minute process to go to the respective office and sign a paper, pay 30 euros, and then you are self-employed. And I think that's as easy as Canada. Thank you.
I take one proposal. So you want to have the entrepreneurship fund paid by the Ministry of Defense. Great idea.
Yeah, we're planning something like this, a Patriot accelerator. But I think there's one. I think there's yeah, it's existing in the US, and but there's one important information for the people in Canada. I think Berlin, when it comes to the entrepreneurship system, is not part of Germany, because 50% of all startups are started by people who are not from Germany. And actually, Sascha Lobo said that 2 years ago Berlin is a city of failure. And actually, this is one important reason why the startup ecosystem and the startups are so strong, because usually the people start their first company in Munich, and then it doesn't work. I'm just saying this because you're out of Munich, and then it doesn't work. And afterwards, when the neighbors don't greet them anymore, they move to Berlin and they do their second startup here. And this is one of the reasons why Berlin is so successful at the moment.
Because the bank cannot find
Thank you.
Bank cannot find you.
Thank you. A little advertisement. If you want to know more about how Berlin is and feels 25 years after the war, from the Hertie Foundation, you get the Hauptstädte, die Hertie Berlin Studie 2014, where they also mentioned sort of the whole bigger ecosystem of Berlin for startups and others. Thank you very much to the podium, and we have a slight change now of podium, and it's the last podium before we move to the reception at the BMW Foundation. And I want you to talk to your neighbor sitting front, next, or else, what you would like to talk about at the reception and who you would like to meet. Okay, we have 1 minute, and then we start again. Thank you.
Ich habe mal bei LinkedIn, glaube ich, euch alle vernetzt.
Achso, ich
Ja?
würde jetzt
Einfach
auch noch.
für LinkedIn. Wunderbar.
Ach, ich habe eine schöne Karte hier.
Ich habe meine nämlich alle schon weg. Aber ich kann einen noch